continuing our sermon series called Revealing True Power. Today we're talking about bad soil good. Last week I wasn't here. I was out. I was missing you guys so much as I was having fun with my family, and so we were going out there. But last week I did the whole video and the sermon on the videos and all that. But it's this kind of key idea, and we're kind of unpacking that further today, but it's this idea of this kingdom of God coming like seeds. Kingdom of God coming as seeds. And what Jesus is doing, which I think is a very interesting idea, is that he's taking, there's those seeds there. When you think of the seed being planted, he also wants you to think about what the seed becomes as we think of a big tree. Right, there's a huge tree, which a lot of times we don't like that. Like, how many of you have planted a tree from a seed? So little of us, right? Like, we spent so much money at this church on landscaping, and that's because we put in saplings, or massive saplings, but massive saplings, because we want it, to be here already and don't have to worry about it growing from a seed. I spend a lot of time at a certain theme park. You look at theme parks and they build a new place. What do? They spend all the money to have all the big trees so it looks established right away. We feel like that about our faith sometimes too, and the way God works. That we want, it's like, oh God, I need to be established right now. And Jesus keeps on saying to us, if we have ears to hear, it comes as seeds and it grows. And I think you'll look back and you'll go, oh, look at this. My faith is providing cool shade and rest for things like birds and all that. So I think that's good news. And this parable, we talked about it last week, and we're going to talk more about it this week. This parable, the four soils, where Jesus says there's a sower and he throws out seed on the ground, and it lands on kind of four different things. It could land, some of the seeds land on the path, some on the rocky soil, some in that weedy soil, and then good soil. And it's so fruitful and grows so much, the seeds that land on that good soil. This is an incredibly important parable, and it's one that we're still talking about to this day. This is one that's it kind of sticks with you. You know it. When you're a kid, you kind of learn it kind of early, and you kind of understand it. Now, I had some of you come up to me, more than one. It was probably about 3 came up to me and went, "Hey, you were talking about." The soils, there's this pressure to be good soil. And they're like, I didn't understand it at all like that. I really understood the soils as it's kind of like our how God works in our evangelistic endeavors, right? That God is using us and our means, that as we are spreading the gospel around, sometimes it's going to land amongst rocky soil. Sometimes it's going to land on the path, right? Sometimes it's going to land in the weeds. But sometimes it's going to land in good soil. And listen, as someone who gets up here and preaches day in and day out, I understand about the word going into rocky soil, you bunch of sinners, right? Like that. That's I get it, and that's so ridiculous. But it's we kind of understand this, but people are like, yeah, but it seems like this matter-of-fact thing that's well, this is kind of how it is. Now, but there's an issue with that I kind of worry about, is that if that is indeed the case, then we in our minds, we try to maximize our ministry efforts lots of times. Well, we like to maximize what it is, so we begin to I don't want to cast seeds on any bad soil. I want to make sure all my seeds go into the good soil, right? Those people are too far gone. That person over there is kind of evil. Those people over there that are doing that with their body, I can't handle that right there. We want to spread seeds in good soil. Now, there was an entire evangelistic movement in the 90s and early 2000s that was just focused on spreading seed on good soil. That had a particular name. Let's see how holy you guys are in the room. Does anyone remember what that was called? Can anyone guess what I'm saying? Ooh, you guys are pretty holy, probably. Then they're not like that. That's good. It was called the seeker sensitive movement. Like, have you ever heard of this before? Like, there was like, if you were involved in church leadership in the 90s, most likely you heard our church needs to be more seeker sensitive. It means we need to make sure our seeds are going onto good soil. Seeker sensitive. Seeker sensitive. People are like seeking out God. We need to find them and throw seeds towards them and all that. And yeah, so that I don't know how well it worked. Like, we're still here today. But what we end up seeing, and this is what I think is going on here, is that Jesus is telling us something important. And these four soils, he says something right at the end of the parable, which is important. He says, whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. That's an interesting thing to say right at the end. It's like, it almost seems like Jesus may be saying something more than just what's written on the page there. He's like, whoever has ears. It's like, you see all these soils and how he's planting them everywhere. And my whole point is that we may judge the world around us and go, like, oh, that's bad soil, let's not throw seeds there. Sometimes we ourselves think about ourselves. It's like, oh man, I am bad soil. And what I think we see today, and that what Mark is trying to give us, is that he's turning bad soil into good soil. And so I want to get into that. And I think that's what Mark is telling us today. So some of you have heard a variation of this sermon before. Great. This idea of turning bad soil to good was one of my original big ideas in the Gospel of Mark. Like, this is years ago. I remember sitting down and just being like, oh my goodness, here it is. So this is what we're talking about today. When you look at the Gospel of Mark, he's talking about seeds growing up. And the first story right after all the seed talk is Jesus calming the storm. And usually when we think about calming the storm, we think about, oh, Jesus is calming the storms in my own life. Remember how we do it with David and Goliath? Like, he's calming the storms, and that's fine. You can definitely read it that way. It's all right. But I think there's more going on in it than just that. I think there's so much more as we look at the story that is happening around there. So to put on our biblical glasses, you have to understand how the Hebrew people understood the sea at that time. At the sea and the oceans, the Hebrews were never really like a sailing bunch. They really weren't into it. They kind of hated the sea. And you can see this even in the book of Job. The book of Job shows this. Now, if you want to find out more about the book of Job, Thursdays at 11 o'clock, Zoom, or oh man, like, look at this. But the book of Job, at the very end of it, God is talking to Job, and God reveals to Job the most scary thing that Job can think of. And it's Leviathan, which is a sea monster. And it's this huge, scary thing, but it doesn't just extend to Leviathans and sea monsters like crocodiles in the water around here, right? Like, it also goes to Jonah. When Jonah wants to run away from the presence of God, where does he go? To the sea. Like that, he goes where God isn't, type of thing is kind of how they feel about it, right? And then not only that, it continues on to our understanding of baptism. Baptism, well, if you look at the old liturgy of baptism, like if you guys pick up the book that you guys read when you were little, I called it old, remember? Anyway, that one didn't work. I won't do that at the next service. Oh, okay, like we're here. But the old liturgy, it talked about our baptism connected to the water of Noah's flood, right? That waters of churning and chaos and hurt and pain, all that stuff, like that waters are there, and it overcomes us, right? Basically the waters of our rejection of God overcome us, much like the cross overcomes Jesus. But as Jesus overcomes the cross and comes out of the grave in resurrection, we come out of the waters of baptism. This is what we're doing with baptism, and we are kind of afresh and made new in that. This is how deep that idea of water and evil goes. Now, you also feel this way if you're anything like me, there's this like psychology thing going on with us in water. And some of you have heard me say this before, but it's my favorite analogy. You know when you're water skiing? Like I grew up in the American South skiing in Lake Lanier and Lake Altoona in Atlanta. Altoona is like a muddy lake. It's beautiful, right? And so it's just filled with clay water. And so you're skiing in there, and then you fall off the skis like you do, and you're waiting on your friends to finally notice, put their Coors Light down long enough. They're not drinking while they're driving, and you finally notice. And when you're sitting there bobbing in the water, waiting for your friends to turn around and get you, like when you're sitting there, do you let your toes go as deep as you can into the water? No. Why? Because Leviathan's under there, he's going to eat your toes off, right? Like, no, like what you do is you tread water you got to look cool while you're doing it. You can't look like you're panicked. And like you got to tread water as well as you can because you don't want your toes to end, right? Like that's what this idea that's inside of us, that idea right there exists in the story. It's just not said because it's understood, all right? So Jesus, they're going across the sea, and suddenly the wind and waves are coming into the boat. This sounds like Noah language. And a great windstorm arose and the waves were breaking into the boat. You hear it? And so that the boat was already filling. And then what is Jesus doing in this situation? Is he bailing like the boys of Jesus are doing, the disciples? No, he's asleep on a cushion. Like, how infuriated will you be? And you can tell that they're like just upset at Jesus. They're like, get up. Like, don't you care that we all are all dying here, right? Don't you care that this is happening too? And Jesus calms the storm. And he looks at them and it's like, why are you afraid? Do you not have any faith? Do you not see what's going on? Think of the chaos of that sea that's out of control and just scary. I would call that bad soil. And Jesus turns that bad soil into good. Now, I know what you're like, Pat, like you're being ridiculous. You're a few fries short of a Happy Meal. You don't know what's going on. Like it's over there. Well, let's keep on going because the very next story is they cross over the sea. They finish cross and they go into the region of the Gerasenes. And this is a Gentile region. Ooh, Gentiles, those heathens, bad soil already. And the first guy they meet is a guy filled with demons. He doesn't just have one demon or two demons or three demons. He's got a legion of demons inside of him. Like this guy is just kind of evil incarnate. And all the people in the town are scared of him, so much so they've tried to like tie him down to things and chain him up. But he keeps breaking the chains. And all he's doing is hanging around the dead in the tombs. And he comes up to Jesus, right? If there's ever somebody that is bad soil, I think it would be one that would be described as being filled with demons, right? And yet Jesus speaks to them. And I'm not going into the whole story, but Jesus speaks to them. Cast them out into some pigs, and the pigs run off of a cliff into some water. I would dare say that Jesus turned bad soil into good in that circumstance. Do you see what we're putting down now? Or do you think that I'm still one can short of a six-pack of Coke? Not Sprite, like no caffeine, right? Let's keep on going. Let's see if I can continue. And then Jesus crosses over the sea again, gets back into Hebrew territory, and all these crowds are just all around him from every side, just pulling in and pushing in on him, and there's people everywhere. And then out of the crowd comes this man named Jarius, and this is a photo of him back in the day. It's a really good shot for being that old. And he falls down on his knees in front of Jesus, and he goes, Jesus, teacher, healer, like come, and my daughter is on her deathbed. Come and save my daughter. But here's the thing. Jarius is the leader of the synagogue. All right, Let's break this down a little bit. So the leader of the synagogue, that's like the church, right? The church back in the day. Who else is hanging out in the synagogue? Who else? That are like big and important. Like Pharisees. Like Pharisees and the scribes and the Sadducees and all that stuff like that. How do those guys feel about Jesus? Well, they don't like him very much, do they? They're like, we need to kill this guy, right? You know, they're doing all this stuff. How long, and what painful journey has Jarius been on? Because we probably felt the same way about Jesus, did he not? All of his friends feel that way. We don't know anything different. What painful journey got him like, we've tried everything, and nothing is getting my daughter better. It's almost like Jesus is this last chance, right? And he falls at his feet. Look, you can hear the pain in him. This is Mark chapter 5, verse 22. He says, then one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jarius by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, my little daughter is at the point of death. Come lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live. Like you can see the pain, what it meant for Jarius to be there. Like Jesus is the last thing he would go to. And Jesus is like, all right, let's go. But the crowds are still all around. You can imagine it's slow going as everyone is trying to touch Jesus and be near Jesus and have Jesus give them a blessing and all those things. And then Jesus, out of the midst of the crowd, yells, who touched me? And his disciples are like, what? Jesus, your elevator's not quite going up to the top. Like, wait, what do you mean? Like, who touched you? What is going on? Like, everybody is touching you right now. Like, you cannot say who touched me and get angry about it when we are all touching you. I mean, look, this is what they say. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, see, that's when they said the elevator comment. You see, the crowd is pushing in around you, and yet you say, who touched me? And they looked around to see who done it. Yeah? And they looked around over there, and Jesus looked around, no, someone touched me. He's like, who touched me? And you can almost picture like this woman kind of sheepishly, like begins raising her hand, right? Begins raising like, I did it. I did it. And this woman had a bleeding issue. And when I was younger, and like I heard this woman had a bleeding issue, I was like, oh man, that'd be terrible, you know? Like I've gotten cuts on my arms and things like that, and it bled for a solid 5 minutes. If that never stopped, that'd be awful, you know? Like over there. And then I got older, and I was like, oh, she's got a bleeding issue. Like all of that, and like it's like a reproductive thing. Oh no, and that's an issue today that is not good. Like that's an issue today that is a serious medical issue. But when you put your biblical glasses on and you look at it through their lens, because it gets even worse. Because if you can remember your Jewish understanding of the faith, that a woman would have to go through a ritual purification to be able to worship God in the temple. And that says that this woman has had this bleeding issue for 12 years. Who remembers what 12 means in the Bible? Do you remember who like what? It's part of the tribe, the 12 disciples. It kind of means all. It kind of means all, like kind of an all word, right? And it's not that strong here, but that's kind of what it means. And so this woman though has been bleeding for all the years, like for all of them. She's been, and through those times, this woman has been bleeding. Hasn't been able to be close to God. What does that do to somebody? That because of something that their body is doing to them, that they feel that they can never be close to God. I would say that something like that is bad soil, right? And Jesus turns that bad soil into good. And he said to her, daughter, Your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. And you can imagine, after that happens and she's healed of all that, everyone's like, whoa, what's going on? This crowd is all around. Oh my goodness. And then you have anxious Jarius still there, right? And he's like, come on, Jesus, come on. That was really cool. We need that energy in my house, right? We need that over there. Like, come on. And as he's encouraging Jesus to come, suddenly his cousin comes and goes, don't bother Jesus anymore. You're too late. Your daughter has died. Your daughter's dead. And what bad soil. Talk about like death is like the worst soil. Jesus may have been talking about seeds falling onto rocky ground and weeds and along the path, but this is just so much worse. Death is like the worst because death is the big problem, because in Genesis chapter 3 with the serpent and Adam and Eve and the fall and curses giving out, death came roaring into the world, and it is the problem. It's the great separation between us and God. And I would say that a dead girl here in the story is the definition of bad soil. And yet Jesus says, but overhearing everything, he said to the synagogue ruler, don't fear, only believe. And the story is interesting because it's all about the crowds just all around there. The crowds are all in him and then they almost like they fall away. They almost like they fall away from him as he walks into the house of the loss of the little girl, in the house of despair. And Jesus has some of his disciples come in with him, and he says this to them. I don't have it on the screen, but that's all right. He says, and he put them all outside and took the child's father, mother, and those that were with him, and went into where the child was. And taking her by the hand, he said to her, Tathia Kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. And she arose, and she began to walk around. Jesus raising the dead, I would say, is Jesus turning bad soil into good. All right, that's basically the sermon, but I want to show you something at the end. This is why I want you to read Mark over and over again. Because when you start reading Mark over and over again, you're going to see new things. And you're like, wait a second, he's talking about that. He's going back and looking at this yet again. So I want you to look at that. So remember, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about the paralytic coming down, like his friends were bringing him down in front of a mat, and Jesus said, your sins are forgiven. And the Pharisees clutched their pearls. They're like, oh my goodness, you cannot forgive sins. And he's like, which is greater? To forgive sins or to say, get up your mat and walk, right? And do you remember what happened over there? I have a little summary of it. It's the very top one. Mark chapter 2:12. The man took up his mat and walked. And what was everyone's reaction? They're amazed. They're like, whoa, what's going on here? Notice the similarities with Mark chapter 5. The girl stood up and began to walk around, and everyone was like, whoa, they're all completely astonished, and they didn't know what to do. They were like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that all happened there. And then you get to the end of the book. The end of the story, right? Where Jesus is dead and he's not alive. He died on a cross for all of us. And the women, they want to go back to the tomb and they're worried about the stone. And when they get there, they see that the stone has been rolled away and they look inside of the tomb. They look inside and the body's not there, and there's an angel, and the angel said, he is risen. He is risen. Oh, Kevin started up there. Kevin was listening in the first service. The first service was silent for so long. I was like, you guys are out of touch. Like it's over there. I know it's close to Lent, but it's not Lent yet. So the angel, they look in the tomb, and the angel said, he is not here. He is risen. There you go. It's so silly. Like that's. But he goes over there, and then the women, he's not here. They walk. They run away, trembling and bewildered in astonishment, right? and they went and fled from the tomb. That's how Mark ends all of these stories. He ends it the same. He's hitting the same beat over and over again, that it's with trembling and amazement that Jesus is turning bad soil into good. And this is what Mark is wanting you to see, that at the end of his gospel, everyone declares that Jesus is bad soil. And they hang him on a cross. The political leaders, they see that Jesus is nothing, that he's like seeds. They get rid of him. The religious leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees, see him as a threat to everything that they know, and he's bad soil. Even his own followers abandon him, thinking that if they keep hitched to his bad soil, that bad soil will infect theirs. They even abandon him, and they view him as a threat on their own life. Everyone abandons him to the grave, but at the very end, the women lean into that tomb. And the angel says, he is risen. Good job, guys. Good job. They lean in the tomb and they discovered that he is risen from the dead. That old bad soil from Genesis 3 has been defeated and demolished, and it has been made good. And the women run away, amazed and trembling at what had happened. And to quote Mark, or Jesus at the end of the soils, do you have ears to hear what is going on? Do you have eyes to see? So my blessing for each one of you is that you may be amazed as you see Jesus turning bad soil into good in all the places that you see, touch, and experience in your own lives this week and month into the end of time. Be amazed at what Jesus has done. Amen. Let's say a prayer.